There is a particular kind of silence that settles over you when you realize the person sitting across from you has completely underestimated you. Not the silence of defeat, not the silence of someone who has run out of words. The silence of someone who has already made every decision that matters, who is simply waiting for the scene to finish playing out exactly as she planned. I sat in that silence and watched my soon to be ex husband reach across our coffee table and lace his fingers through another woman's hand, right there in my living room, on the sofa I had spent 5 months saving to buy. And I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I simply placed the divorce paperwork on the table between us and said very calmly that I would be collecting my belongings the following morning. The look of relief on both their faces told me everything I needed to know about how badly they had misjudged the situation. My name is Simone. I am 32 years old, and I have spent the past 7 years building a career as an interior designer, which means I have spent 7 years learning that empty spaces and beautiful spaces are two entirely different things, and that the difference between them is almost always one person's vision, labor, and money. This is the story of how I reclaimed all three. I met Marcus when I was 26 and he was 37. He was charming in the specific way that older men sometimes are, confident and settled, and seemingly unbothered by the things that make younger people anxious. He had inherited a house from his grandparents the year before we met, a solidly built property in a neighborhood that was quietly becoming desirable, though the house itself had not been updated since approximately 1987. I remember the first time he showed it to me. Popcorn ceilings, carpet the color of old mustard, light fixtures that looked like they had been selected specifically to cast the most unflattering possible light on every surface in every room. The bones of the house were genuinely good, solid construction, good proportions, tall windows. But everything else was an apology. Marcus saw a free place to live. I saw potential. We married 18 months after we met, and almost immediately I began the slow, careful process of transformation. I want to be precise about this, because precision matters when you are telling a story about what was taken and what was reclaimed. I used my own savings, my own professional connections, which meant I could source materials and furniture at rates the average person cannot access. My own design skills, which are not decorative instinct but a trained, practiced, technical expertise that I had spent years developing and continue to charge clients handsomely for. Every piece that came into that house was documented, not out of suspicion, not out of any premonition about how things would end, but because documentation is simply how I work. I am a professional. I keep receipts. I photograph purchases. I note dates and costs and sources. It is as natural to me as breathing. Over 3 years of marriage, that house became something else entirely. I stripped the carpet and refinished the original hardwood beneath it. I had the ceilings redone and repainted every room in a palette I spent weeks developing, testing color samples in different light at different times of day. I sourced a custom dining table from a craftsman I had worked with on a client project, a piece that became the visual anchor of the entire main floor. I designed and installed statement lighting throughout, pieces I had selected carefully because they worked with the specific ceiling heights and window placements of each room. I had custom wallpaper printed for the dining area and the primary bedroom, designed specifically for those spaces, coordinated to the inch. I also documented every receipt, every invoice, every bank transfer. Professional habit. 6 months before the divorce, I found the messages. Marcus had left his phone unlocked on the kitchen island, which in retrospect he may not have done intentionally, but which I believe some part of him did not work very hard to prevent. I was not looking for anything. I was simply picking up his phone to move it off the receipt I needed to photograph, and the screen was already open to a conversation. Her name was Cassandra. She was 23, a temporary administrative hire at Marcus's firm. Her social media presence, which I reviewed thoroughly in the hours that followed, was a carefully curated collection of aspirational home interiors and lifestyle content, the kind of account maintained by someone who desperately wants a particular aesthetic life and has not yet found a way to afford it. Her messages to Marcus were illuminating in ways she could not have intended. "Your taste is incredible," she had written. "Your house looks like something from a magazine. I cannot believe you put all of that together yourself." He had not corrected her. I read through weeks of messages with the same methodical calm I bring to reviewing a client's renovation budget. I noted the dates, I noted the locations of their meetings. I noted the particular narrative Cassandra had constructed around Marcus, the sophisticated older man with the beautiful home and the wife who was always working and apparently did not appreciate what she had. I saved screenshots of everything. Then I put the phone back on the kitchen island exactly where I had found it, finished photographing my receipt, and began thinking about what came next. I did not confront Marcus immediately. Instead, I spent the following 3 months being very quiet and very thorough. I consulted a family law attorney named Diane, a sharp, efficient woman who had handled the divorce of one of my previous clients and came with the highest possible recommendation. Diane reviewed our prenuptial agreement, which Marcus and I had signed before the wedding, a document stating clearly that in the event of divorce, there would be no division of shared property. You keep what is yours, I keep what is mine. Marcus had signed that document believing it protected the house, which he had inherited before our marriage, and which was legally his alone. He had not thought carefully about everything else. Every item you purchased with your own funds after the date of marriage, Diane told me, is your property. Furniture, fixtures, decor, appliances purchased by you, all of it, yours. The agreement you signed is actually quite clear. I went home and pulled up my documentation files. The spreadsheet was 73 rows long. I reached out to Cassandra directly after I had everything in place. I suggested we all meet together, which I framed as wanting a mature adult conversation about the situation. She arrived at my house in a dress that was clearly purchased specifically for the occasion, and she carried herself with the particular confidence of someone who believes they have already won. She sat beside Marcus on my velvet sofa, her eyes traveling around the room with an expression I recognized immediately, the expression of someone already mentally rearranging the furniture, already imagining herself in the space, already claiming it. I want you to know, she said, leaning forward with what she believed was gracious sympathy, that I never intended for anyone to be hurt by this. Let's just get to the paperwork, I said, sliding the divorce documents across the coffee table. Her eyes lit up when she saw Marcus's signature already on the page. She squeezed his hand. I told you she would handle this like an adult, she said to him, which was, in my professional opinion, an interesting thing to say out loud in someone else's house. Marcus looked relieved in the way people look when they believe a difficult scene is resolving itself in their favor. You can take whatever you brought with you personally, he said. Clothes, your equipment, whatever. We're not going to make this difficult. Wonderful, I said. The movers will be here at 9 tomorrow morning. I hired the best moving company in the city, the same firm I used regularly for client relocations. I had called their foreman, a man named Gerald, who I had worked with on a dozen projects, and sent him my inventory list in advance. He had called me back after reviewing it. Ms. Reeves, he said carefully, this is quite a comprehensive list. I know, I said. Please bring 2 trucks. Marcus and Cassandra were still in robes when the crew arrived the next morning, 2 large vehicles and 8 workers pulling up to the house at precisely 9 o'clock. I watched from the doorway as Gerald and his team began methodically, professionally, and with great care removing every item on my list. The artwork came down first, then the furniture, each piece wrapped in moving blankets with the kind of careful attention that only professionals trained to handle valuable pieces can provide. The lighting fixtures were detached with precision. The custom window treatments were removed along with the hardware. The hand-woven area rugs were rolled and protected. The kitchen appliances I had purchased and installed, the high-end espresso machine, the stand mixer, the full cookware collection, all of it documented, all of it boxed. It took Marcus 25 minutes to understand what was happening. That is my sofa, he said, his voice rising as 2 workers carefully lifted the sectional. I handed him a folder. Inside was a copy of the purchase receipt, the bank statement showing the withdrawal from my personal account, and a brief note from Diane outlining the relevant legal language from our prenuptial agreement. His face went through several colors while he read it. You cannot take all of this, he said finally. Everything on that list was purchased by me with my money after our wedding date, I said. You agreed in writing to no division of property. I am not dividing anything. I am simply taking what belongs to me. Cassandra stood in the doorway of the now half-empty living room, and I watched the specific moment when she began to understand what the next chapter of her life was actually going to look like. The room around her was revealing the house's original state, walls that needed paint, flooring that had not been touched where the rugs had covered it, light switches with no fixtures attached. You can't take the lighting, she said. Those are part of the house. They were installed by me, purchased by me, and are not structural components of the property, I said. My attorney has confirmed this, twice. By early afternoon, the living room was bare. By mid-afternoon, the kitchen held nothing but its permanent cabinetry and countertops. By late afternoon, every room had been returned to something that closely resembled its state before I had ever set foot inside it. The last thing to be handled was the wallpaper. A specialty crew arrived as Gerald's team was loading the final truck. Cassandra, who had been sitting on the bare floor of the living room since the dining chairs had been removed several hours earlier, looked up when they walked through the door carrying their equipment. "What are they here for?" she asked. "The wallpaper," I said. "It was custom designed and printed specifically for this house. I designed it myself. It belongs to me." "You cannot take wallpaper off walls," Marcus said. But his voice had lost all conviction by this point, replaced by something that sounded very much like a man who has made a series of catastrophic miscalculations and is only now beginning to fully inventory the damage. "I am not taking the walls," I said pleasantly. "Just what's on them." I left them there as the specialty crew began their work. Marcus standing in the center of an emptied room, Cassandra sitting on the floor beside him, the house around them stripped back to its original bones, every flaw now fully visible without the careful, considered, expensive work I had used to conceal and transform them. 3 weeks later, Marcus called. I almost did not answer, and then I decided that I wanted to hear this particular phone call. His voice was different. The confidence that had characterized every interaction we had for 3 years was gone, replaced by something thinner and more uncertain. He told me that Cassandra had ended things. He said she had not handled the transition well, that she had complained constantly, that the house in its current state was, in her words, unlivable. He said he had bought some furniture from a discount store and that it looked wrong in every room, though he could not explain why. He said he had been thinking about everything and that he had been wrong, about the marriage, about Cassandra, about what I had contributed. He asked if I would consider coming back. I sat with the phone pressed to my ear, looking around my new apartment, which I had furnished slowly and deliberately over the past several weeks, keeping only a few pieces from the marriage that carried no difficult memories and selling the rest. The space around me was mine in a way that no room in that house had ever felt, not because it was more beautiful, though I believed it would be, but because every decision in it had been made entirely for myself. "I am not able to do that," I told him. He started to say something else and I ended the call, then blocked his number. Diane finalized the divorce paperwork 8 days later. I think about that house sometimes, not with grief or regret, but with the particular clarity that comes after a long project has been properly completed. I gave that space 3 years and a great deal of money and the full weight of my professional skill. I made something genuinely beautiful out of something that had no business being beautiful. And when it became clear that the space was being used to diminish me rather than to shelter me, I took my work back. Some people hear this story and say I was cold, calculated, even cruel, and I understand that reading. But here's what I know from 7 years of professional experience. A beautiful space does not create itself. It requires vision and labor and investment, and someone who cares enough to see what could exist where only emptiness currently does. I provided all of that, and when the person I provided it for confused the space with his own achievement, when he let someone else believe the beauty around him was a reflection of his own taste and effort rather than mine, I simply corrected the record, not with an argument, not with a confrontation. With 2 moving trucks, a specialty wallpaper removal crew, and 31 months of receipts organized into a single folder, the house on that street still stands. I imagine it still looks more or less the way it did before I arrived, functional and uninspired and slightly apologetic about itself. And I imagine that sometimes Marcus stands in one of those empty rooms and understands exactly what he lost. Not me, the work, which, when you think about it carefully, was always the more irreplaceable of the two.